Once more, enjoy your time in Prague.
Thank you.
Every next time you can visit us in Radio.
I mean, you know that.
We can say that any refugee crisis is similar, but what have you personally learned from Ukraine crisis and everything what had happened in Europe since February?
We have learned so many things. Often we see this crisis in other parts of the world. The fact that an enormous conflict erupted in the heart of Europe meant that Europe itself became the recipient, the immediate recipient of a very large refugee flow, which means refugee flows of this kind can happen anywhere. And any country can be called at some point to the task of receiving refugees. It's an important lesson. The other lesson is that, if I can be frank, we have heard for many years now by some politicians that in Europe, that Europe was full, that nobody anymore could come, that people had to go back to their countries. We had to
But isn't it?
We had to build walls and push boats back.
Put it
and
aside
then Europe, and then
walls,
Europe was able.
Isn't it Europe full of the refugees? We have more than 1 million refugees in Germany, for example.
No, what I mean is, in spite of this, Europe, in the space of a few weeks, was able to take 5-6 million refugees efficiently, generously, in a very humane way. So I understand Ukrainians are from next door. There is a lot of sympathy for them, for obvious reasons. But the system worked. It's a good lesson that I hope Europe will apply for other situations as well.
Does it mean that Europe is ready for eventual new influx of refugees from Ukraine? This is something that we should talk about.
Well, that I think Europe is ready for that if it happens. Let's hope it doesn't happen. At the moment, the war is very concentrated, as we know, in the eastern part of the country, and what we see is internal displacement in Ukraine, which is very severe and very serious. Of course, we cannot know what's next in this very unpredictable war. If the war, God forbid, should move towards the west, then we could see more people fleeing, but in the last few weeks we have not seen that.
Based on your experience, what is most important for refugees from Ukraine at this moment?
I think what has been done by Europe is what is important for them. Grant them what is called temporary protection. They don't have to worry about staying in European countries. They have freedom of movement and they have access to services. This is really the most important. That's why I'm saying it was not that Europe just took the refugees, but it took them in a very efficient manner. And this is important for them. I think what also important is to eventually make the decision to go back. Many of them, I think a lot, will want to go back, but this will depend on the evolution of the war.
I must ask you personally, as a person who is deeply involved in the issue of refugees, have you been a little disappointed if we compare reaction of Europe regarding Ukraine crisis, Ukraine refugees, and everything that we have seen, for example, 5 or 7 years ago, on the climax of refugees crisis with the people from Syria, from Iraq, etc. So in that time we had wire fences in Serbia, between Serbia and Hungary, after between Serbia and Macedonia partially, before everything between Bulgaria and Turkey. So what was your personal feeling with regarding that different approach?
You know, I get this question quite often. I am not disappointed by the fact that Europe was generous and open now. I was disappointed when it was not back then. I remember standing exactly at that point that you described, at the border between Hungary and Serbia, and seeing this huge barbed wire. That was a low moment of my time with refugees, of my many years of refugees, especially as a European. I felt ashamed. But now I'm not disappointed. Now I'm happy that Europe showed that it is possible to receive many people in an effective and generous manner. Let's hope it is a good lesson that can be applied elsewhere.
So optimism, after all, is the only solution. Do
Well,
you have some concrete answer to assure those people from that part of the world that approach to them would be better in the future? or similar as the approach to the people from Ukraine?
Optimism is a big word in this migration refugee debate, which is so difficult politically, but I can see some evolution of the discussion. Today, in Brussels, there is a discussion, for example, on what is called solidarity, European solidarity, not for Ukraine, for other people coming through the Mediterranean, for example. What's solidarity? It's a way to share the responsibility for these new arrivals. It's going to be on a voluntary basis, it's going to be on quota, it needs to be implemented, so it's just the beginning. But perhaps the Ukraine crisis has moved something in the European migration, refugee debate, and I hope that it is the case. We will certainly support those efforts.
But again, we can talk about discrimination among refugees from Ukraine, especially regarding Roma people. What about you?
Well, the message we are sending to all countries is that there should be no discrimination. You remember that in the early days there was certainly episodes of discrimination towards non-Ukrainians, people of African origin, Middle East origin, students in Ukraine that were also trying to flee. I think that was eventually addressed. Now we have other minorities that maybe face problems. It is important that everybody is treated in the same way. By the way, it is very important that the attention that is given to the crisis of Ukrainian refugees, the same attention is given to crises in other parts of the world. I travel a lot to Africa, to the Middle East. I went to Afghanistan a few weeks ago. There is a sense that attention is shifting away from those crises that need very much European resources and engagement.
And really, what is the situation in Afghanistan? What was your impressions regarding refugees in Afghanistan?
The situation is very difficult, but I think that the very big humanitarian investment that has been made in the last few months, for now...
But is it possible to cooperate with current government?
Let me finish. For now, that investment has been able to limit the crisis. The problem is the Taliban have to evolve their policies, especially in respect of women and minorities, but it is important not to let go and to continue that dialogue with the Taliban themselves. Otherwise, a big humanitarian crisis there would provoke additional migration towards Europe. There's no doubt about that.
And do you have the impression that it's possible to cooperate with Taliban?
It is possible. The Taliban are not a monolithic body. They have many different factions, one could say. It is possible to talk with some of them, but there is a debate within themselves, which I think we need to somehow understand, and this should inform the way we talk to the Taliban. It's gradual, and we need a lot of patience.
According to Croatian non-governmental organizations, some 300 children without parents are coming on monthly level on the border of European Union. How international community can help to that more vulnerable group among refugees?
The whole issue of people coming to the borders of Europe needs to be dealt with, as I said. And what is being discussed today in Brussels, I hope, will be a step in the right direction. Because if there is a sense by the countries of first arrival that other countries will share this burden in a more systematic manner, this may help. But what needs to stop at all cost is the pushbacks that we see all over the European borders. This is not acceptable. This is exactly the opposite of what has been done for the Ukrainians. So that's discriminatory in a way. Why you are taking some and you push away the other? You may say these people are, we need to determine whether they're refugees or not. Well, do it. And then once you've done it, we can discuss how they can be received or not. But pushing people back indiscriminately, as is happening at land and sea borders, is absolutely unacceptable.
Mr. Grandi, thank you very much for your time for Radio Free Europe.
Thank you very much.